Hi, and welcome to GC's in the House, a podcast spotlighting general counsels. I'm your host, Lena Guo. In my conversations with GCs, we discuss how they got in the top legal seat, obstacles that they had to overcome along the way, and how they are tackling new challenges. Hi, and thanks for listening. My guest today is Alice Geene, Chief Legal Officer at Paycor, a publicly listed leading provider of SaaS HCM solutions. Alice started her legal career in private practice in New York City after graduating Harvard Law School. Throughout her in-house career, Alice has been driving growth and transforming technology companies, including taking 2 companies public. Today, Alice shares how she thinks in-house attorneys can hone their business skills, lessons learned from the IPO process, and how being a lawyer in the tech industry has changed over the decades. All right, on to the conversation. Hi, Alice. How are you?
Hey, Lena, I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's so nice to speak with you again, and thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure.
I wanted to chat with you and learn about your career journey to becoming a CLO because you have done so much in your career. You have extensive experience at technology companies, including taking your current public company, Paycor, public in 2021. And I know it was one of the most successful software IPOs of that year. And over the course of your career, you have really driven growth and acceleration in tech companies, both public and private. So would love to learn a little bit about how you got to where you are and hear more about your experiences. First, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up and what led you to a career in the law?
Yes, Lena, totally happy to do that. So I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. I am a first generation Taiwanese American. My parents came to the United States in the 1960s to pursue their education as scientists, and they wound up staying, taking jobs in St. Louis, where my sister and I grew up, and ultimately raising us here. I originally wanted to go to medical school. And when I was growing up, I was actually really interested in legal drama TV shows. And that continued when I went to college. I remember watching Law and Order with a group of dorm mates as basically a way to relieve stress. And it got me interested in being a litigator. And ultimately, it was a big reason why I applied to go to law school.
Oh, I didn't realize that you went to law school in part because of Law and Order, which I also watched a ton of in college. How did you then end up going from being a litigator after graduating law school to transitioning in-house?
So I often say that law school, especially Harvard Law School, where I went, is a little bit like an on-ramp to becoming a litigator in a big New York law firm, which is what I started out doing for a couple of years. I really enjoyed a lot of the people that I worked with. I will tell you, it was a little bit naive of me to believe that being a litigator in a big law firm for corporate clients is like Law and Order. In Law and Order, there's all these cool outfits. Every single case is dramatic and fascinating. And even the junior lawyers play a really, really big part in generating all these interesting outcomes. And occasionally it can be like that. It turns out I think the reality is not really like that. And I needed to really get into practice to figure that out. In a way, that was great experience because that caused me to sort of really reflect on what I wanted to do. I started thinking about options outside of practicing in a big firm and options outside of litigation. And at the time, there were a lot of technology companies. It was the time of the internet startup. I was in New York City, and I ultimately wound up taking a position in house. at what was the first of 5 technology companies. My first company was called Juno Online Services. It was a dial-up internet access company. We actually mailed discs to people at their homes, and you would install the software on your computer, and there would be that staticky dial-up where you could access the internet for free, and the company paid for it with advertising. It was a great experience. I got a ton of experience in just a couple of years, and it was the first of what is now 5 in-house experiences in growing and scaling technology companies, including being CLO or GC at the last 3 that I've been part of.
So that's right. You've really been in the tech world for most of your essentially your entire in-house career. And I know you were at Orbitz for quite a while, and that was a pivotal point. So what led you to Orbitz Worldwide in Chicago?
So I did 2 tech companies in New York, and I got married in New York. My husband and I had our son, and we loved New York City, but ultimately we wanted to raise our family closer to my parents, who lived at the time in St. Louis. So we decided to relocate to Chicago, and Orbitz Worldwide was one of the big technology employers that was headquartered in Chicago. So I joined the company as a senior counsel working on complex tech transactions. And then I wound up staying for nearly 8 years and having the opportunity to do a ton of different responsibilities and jobs in the in-house legal department as the company went through an IPO, went through a bunch of acquisitions and corporate structures, had a bunch of different industry shifts that led to different forms of commercial transactions. And I wound up being in my at the company, the interim GC. And while I didn't really know it when I moved to Chicago with my family to take the job in 2005, it turned out to be one of the most formative experiences that I had as an in-house counsel, and the experience where I actually formed the desire and the motivation to really pursue being a GC with my career.
How did you end up becoming interim GC at Orbitz? And can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So the GC of the company, who was a very experienced public company technology general counsel, left the company for Silicon Valley to join a pre-IPO company. And that was a wonderful opportunity for him. He actually was a wonderful sponsor and mentor throughout the time that I worked for him, and has continued to be in my career generally as I've progressed to GC and CLO roles. And the company kicked off a general counsel search. That search, which was supposed to take about a quarter, wound up taking a year. And I became the interim GC for what was supposed to be a short term stint and ultimately turned into a year-long assignment as the interim GC. I was a candidate in the GC for the GC role, and the company ultimately wound up selecting a permanent GC that had significantly more experience than I did. And I think that's not an uncommon phenomenon, especially with large public company searches.
Right.
But looking back on it, it turned out to be one of the best formative experiences that I've had, because I was essentially able to say that I had done all of the responsibilities for a year of a public GC and in a very complex tech company that had a global footprint, very large, complex organization, and a lot of significant industry related issues. And that's turned out to be a pretty strong foundation as I've talked to a bunch of companies along the way and pursued and ultimately been offered GC jobs.
That makes sense. And looking back, what do you think were some of the factors that attributed to your ability to land your first GC role? And were there any factors that you felt hindered you along the way?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think that I think that there are many associate GCs and deputy GCs who are looking at that sort of number one spot. And I think that's completely understandable. It's a tremendously interesting opportunity to have an impact on an organization, to be able to be a GC, to work directly with a CEO, a board, and an executive team, and a real opportunity to contribute to a business at a level that goes really well beyond somebody's legal expertise and knowledge. And I think that the ability to become a GC, and this is something I've learned along the way, is it depends actually much more on one's business ability and ability to manage relationship dynamics, especially at a senior level with a board, a CEO, and an executive team. And yes, the legal knowledge and expertise and experience are incredibly important, but at the GC and CLO level, everybody basically assumes that you have that knowledge or you can tap that knowledge from your team or the right outside advisors. And what they're really looking to the GC to do is to be able to, in real time, very fluidly integrate that legal knowledge and experience with the understanding of the business goals and to help the organization very quickly land and achieve those goals. So I would say, it was when I had that realization and I spent much more effort and time really trying to land the business goals and utilizing the legal skill to do that, that really helped me to land the first role and has helped me to become a more experienced and effective GC since then. As far as things that may have hindered along the way, I mean, I think that, lawyers are conservative and detail oriented. And that's why we pursued the law, and that is what makes us smart and good at what we do. And I think it's always important to remember that at the senior level, especially for GCs, business leaders are looking for lawyers to articulate that very, very succinctly, and then to immediately integrate that with business advice. So, as far as hindering along the way, I think I sort of had to learn that when I was invited to the table, yes, people wanted my legal knowledge, but I needed to be very, very sharp and succinct about that. And what they were really looking for, that was the true value driver, was how does that tie to the ultimate business goal? And how can you help me solve the problem? And I think that just takes some time and experience. And it's probably something that, AGCs and DGCs who are looking to become a GC have to sort of figure out as they reach for that top spot.
That is really, really great advice and very insightful. And you mentioned that some of these skills just also comes with experience. How are you able to hone your business skill or your ability to manage some business relationships? Do you were there books that you had to read? Did you get coaching? Did it just come with time and experience? What would you say to attorneys who do want to sharpen up on those areas?
So I would say, yes, tap formal development opportunities and executive coaches along the way. I have certainly used those regularly in my career, and I would definitely encourage in-house lawyers to approach their companies for support in seeking out those opportunities. And I think that they certainly cannot hurt, and in many, many cases, they can help. I actually think what is more effective is to regularly and proactively raise your hand to your GC or senior business leaders that you have a track record of success supporting and working with, and saying, this is a career interest of mine, whether it's in this organization or someday in another one, to be able to operate in that top spot as the CLO or the GC. And I'm so happy that we have this effective relationship. Can you keep your eye out for visible opportunities where I can, one, work on things that I don't have in my prior experiences so that I can round out my skill set. Two, get exposure to the board of directors, the CEO, and other members of the C suite, because I'd love to be able to show them what I can do to support them and help them be successful. And I think in gaining each of those experiences, you're able to, one, expand your knowledge and your expertise that you bring to the table when you are invited to that room. But two, really just expand the network of senior business people who look at you as a combination of an effective senior lawyer and a business leader who really helps to drive and achieve goals. And I think that's kind of the key, is to just start to build a track record of successes like that. And that's essentially how you position yourself for these roles when they come up.
That's also really great advice. Did you have a mentor, whether it was within your company or outside of your company, whom you could go to, or who could either be a sounding board or to help you build your track record of success?
Yes, I've been fortunate to be mentored a few times along the way at different points in my career, at times by the GC of my organization. So, for example, when I talked about serving as the interim general counsel of Orbitz for a year, it was because my prior boss left the company to become the general counsel of a pre-IPO company in Silicon Valley. And I was fortunate to work for him for about 4.5 years while he was in the GC role. And he took a very active interest in mentoring me to become a more effective lawyer, to have a bigger impact at Orbitz. And I mean, this helped me and it also helped him because I was able to take on a lot of responsibilities in the department. And he also, was a very active sponsor of mine in terms of helping me to find my way to assignments that gave me the visibility with the CEO, with other members of the executive team at the company, and ultimately with the board of directors, which is why, I was able to be the interim GC and to have the trust of all of those leaders. Um, at other times, I think that, a mentor is sort of like someone who can help you at a particular point in time. At other times, I've been fortunate to be mentored by the CEO of an organization. So, for example, at Rewards Network, which was a PE backed, privately held company, the first CEO that I worked for invested a lot of time in helping me and tapping my knowledge and my opinion about company strategy. And that was a very, very formative experience to be asked to offer my perspective as a business person and a leader and somebody who could help shape the company's strategy in addition to bringing my legal skills as the GC. And I would say that was an example of being mentored by a CEO. And, you know, it really expanded my knowledge and my abilities in the sense that I sort of came to understand through that consistent relationship that part of what I needed to bring at a very senior level as the GC is, the detailed knowledge of the business and a very strong opinion about how I believed that the company should approach its strategy.
Wonderful to hear that you've had some really great mentors along the way. People always say that that is a really huge factor in terms of career development and growth. You've taken two companies public now. What did you learn from those experiences, and what advice would you give for senior attorneys preparing for a future IPO?
So I think it is an absolutely fantastic experience to work on an IPO. I was a second chair at Orbitz in an IPO, and I was fortunate to be CLO of the company and to co-lead the IPO team alongside the company's CFO when we took the company public in summer of 2021. I mean, whether you are an in-house lawyer or you're on the finance and accounting team, in an organization that is prepping to go public and actually puts together a deal team and executes on it. I mean, there's just an unbelievable amount that you can gain as far as experience and knowledge. I mean, you know, simply the number of players on a deal team and, you know, what the underwriters do, um, the role that the many, many lawyers in the different practice areas in the company as the issuer's law firm plays, um, helping an in-house legal team to get up to speed on the differences between the responsibilities of a public company relative to a private company, which are, I think, many, many times the complexity and, carry a significant amount of subject matter expertise in SEC, listing standards, whether it's NYSE or NASDAQ, how to operate and support a public board and its responsibilities. I mean, I could go on, as you can hear, for an entire podcast about this. And I think that if you have the opportunity to work on one of these transactions, it can be one of the most just value adding experiences to your career and your knowledge and your development as an in-house lawyer. As far as, advice for senior attorneys who are prepping for a future IPO with your company, or if you're thinking about joining a pre-IPO company that is really in earnest looking to execute on an IPO, I would say, I think it's the time to be humble about what you don't know, to be confident about what you do know, but also to be humble about what you don't know. Because, I've worked in tech companies for a long time. The amount of knowledge and functional experts and corporate functions that have to come together for an IPO to be successful is really, really daunting. And I mean, I give huge kudos to, the accountants who have to figure out, how to very quickly and accurately and thoroughly, report on a public company's financials. And one thing I learned is, as a lawyer, I can't learn and know what they know. There is a reason that the accountants do what they do, but I absolutely have to be supportive of and respect and facilitate what they do because, you know, the key to a public company is being able to quickly and accurately and responsibly execute on its reporting responsibilities. So, what I would say to lawyers is bring your knowledge, but also be prepared that like on any given day, 90% of the things that the company needs to be able to execute on, other people know. And your role is to help them to be successful. And actually, that was one of the biggest learnings from leading Paycor's IPO was that I had a fraction of the knowledge and I did bring that to the table when it was needed. But, I also leaned on very, very heavily the knowledge of a massive number of other functions in the company. And a big part of the job was to be able to bring them together and to make sure that they could successfully execute their responsibilities.
That's great advice. So it sounds like it's very important in this process to be confident, but to also stay humble. You've been a lawyer in the tech industry for a long time. How do you think being a lawyer in the industry has changed since you've started practicing?
So, I mean, it's, it's actually astounding how much things have changed in 25 years plus of practice in tech companies. I mean, you know, um, when I first started, yes, there was data privacy, but the level to which data privacy and cybersecurity have become really top issues for companies. I mean, every GC is to some degree expected to be a privacy lawyer. And I mean, I really mean that. It's like, no, you didn't necessarily have to be in the data privacy practice group at whatever firm you were part of when you had that part of your career, but you have to be adept at talking about it because it's what your audit committee wants to know, that you're responsibly working with your CTO and your chief information security officer to oversee at the company. Um, I mean, we're all talking about AI these days, and like
Mhm.
this is a set of things that didn't even exist, as kind of an area of business knowledge when I began practicing in tech companies. And now, you know, all GCs and all senior in-house lawyers have had to become knowledgeable about the guidelines around AI and to be able to get into a meeting with product teams, technology teams, strategy teams, M&A teams, and be, you know, pretty knowledgeable at a set of things that didn't really start getting legislated until about the last year or so. And where, every continuing legal education webinar that you go to, there's a whole set of new emerging standards and bills and regulations that everybody is talking about taking effect in the next 12 to 24 months. There's just, it's a really incredible, massive, and interesting amount of information that you have to be able to rapidly learn and integrate now that didn't really exist a couple of decades ago.
Absolutely. And GCs and CLOs seem to be wearing more hats than ever, and it can be a rewarding but very stressful job. So I end the conversation with the same question. What do you do to decompress at the end of the day?
Yeah, I'm glad you're asking that. Thank you for doing that. It's true that this job is not for the faint of heart. And I think that everyone who does it, needs that outlet. In my case, the outlet is yoga. Um, I started this in New York City when I first became a lawyer because a friend invited me to a yoga class that his wife taught. I just expected to go and have a nice time and then go on about my life. And, I actually had an absolutely phenomenal time and began practicing it consistently. And I can now say that I have been a yogi for 25 plus years, pretty much as long as I've been a lawyer. And
Wow.
I even love it so much that in 2019, I went to a yoga teacher training class and got a yoga teacher training certification. So I may be, not to say that there aren't others, but I may be the only tech company GC and yoga teacher out there.
Sounds like that almost sounds like some kind of, group that we're starting for yoga certified tech company GCs. Well, the next time I'm in Chicago, Alice, I would love to do a yoga class with you. So,
Yes,
um,
please, let's do.
yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me and to share your experiences and your career journey with the audience. It's been really wonderful learning about how how you've got to where you are today and to hear all of your really, really helpful advice. So thanks again.
Welcome, my pleasure.
Thanks so much for listening to GC's in the House. I hope you enjoyed this episode and will join me next time for an in-depth discussion with another general counsel. I welcome your feedback and recommendations for guests. You can reach me at lguo@mlaglobal.com. Please also reach out if you have any questions or comments about today's episode. Until next time.